Everyone's favourite doctor, Dr. Hilary Jones, is with us here. How are you today?
Yes, I'm very well and enjoying a bit of sunshine.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, there's some new research out today which says that up to 1.4 million Brits are experiencing gambling harms and would benefit from a lot of treatment. So what's your take on this research, really? What do you make of it?
Well, I think it's really interesting and it reflects what's really going on. People who get into trouble from gambling often get into trouble in secret. Then they don't share what's going on. They get themselves into financial debt and they feel a bit of embarrassment and guilt and shame about that. So they hide it away. It doesn't surprise me at all that 1.4 million people are reporting gambling harm.
Yeah.
And it's not just financial debt, it's relationship difficulties they get into as a result. It affects their mental and their physical health. It can affect their job and employment. It can have all sorts of repercussions. And whilst there are 1.4 million people who currently need help and support right now, there's probably 2.9 million people, I reckon, who are at risk because of their gambling habits. It can become an addiction. Everyone likes a little flutter, and most people control it. They know what they can risk and they know when to stop. But for some people, it's an addiction like tobacco or alcohol. And that little bit, there's always that next thing they want to do. They make a little win, they want to make a bigger win, or they make a little loss, they want to make up for it. And in the end, they lose everything.
Yeah.
So the good news is that there is help for all those people.
Yeah, and this is an addiction that probably doesn't get talked about as much as drugs and alcohol because perhaps you don't consume it in the same way.
Absolutely right. I mean, you can tell if someone's using recreational drugs very often. You can tell if someone's drinking too much. There are signs that we're more familiar with. But gambling is something that it's easy for people to hide, whether it's online gambling, what they're doing in secret on the computer at home, or whether they're going into the bookies or, betting on the horses or the dogs, or they're just, buying too many tickets on the national lottery. There are all sorts of ways where people gamble, and it's not obvious until they start going down the slippery slope of losing too much money and getting into debt and then someone discovering it and affects relationships. So, yeah, it's important that people seek help when they need it. And the good news is that the new campaign, the National Gambling Treatment Service campaign, offers people that help and support. And 9 out of 10 people who used it last year, and there were 8,500 people who did, report that it's really helpful and very effective for them.
Yeah. And gambling is, I suppose, just like alcohol and things like that, it's part of our society in a way. There are ways to have a healthy relationship with it, like you might bet on a horse or something, but there's a difference between that and having a full-on addiction.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, any addiction sort of uses the pleasure pathway to the brain, and it's kind of, we get excited by it and we can get thrilled by it. And, gambling, like alcohol in moderation, is fine.
Yeah.
It's fun. But when it gets out of hand and you can't control it, it can take over your life and your very existence. And then it becomes harmful in many, many ways. It affects your mental health. It causes anxiety, depression, isolation, withdrawal. And as I say, relationship difficulties often ensue. So getting that help is really important. And I would encourage any individual who's identifying with what we're talking about, or knows a loved one who might be in that position, to contact a helpline or go online. And I can give you those details if you'd like them. The phone number is 0808 80 20 133. And the website is begambleaware.org/NGTS, which is the National Gambling Treatment Service.
Yeah. And this research as well has shown that gambling seems to be going back to pre-pandemic levels. So that suggests to me that it was actually lower during the pandemic. Why do you think that would be?
Well, I think although some people do like to gamble online, and there's plenty of that going on, and I think maybe people were going out less during lockdown, so they weren't buying tickets for the national lottery. Maybe maybe. They weren't going to the bookies. Horse racing was off, very large. So was the dogs. And, I think there was less opportunity to gamble. And people were probably focused on other anxieties, other things. But now life is getting back to normal with the easing of restrictions because of the pandemic. The pandemic's still there, of course, but I think the easing restrictions has made people more willing to socialize and do the things that they would do, which would be drinking and smoking and recreational drugs and gambling, all the things that, can get out of hand.
Yeah. Would lockdown have maybe helped some people with gambling addictions? Because maybe if they can't gamble for nearly 2 years straight, then they might have lost that buzz, so to speak.
It's possible that people can change their behaviours in all sorts of ways, and we all changed our behaviour during the pandemic because we had to. It was enforced on us to some extent, and sometimes it was personal responsibility and choice. But yes, I mean, if there isn't the opportunity to abuse things, then sometimes it can help people. Equally, it can give people the desire to do more when the restrictions ease. So it swings and roundabouts. But we're certainly back to pre-pandemic levels, and it's something that we just need to be aware of. We need to increase that narrative about gambling. And personally, I'd like to see less adverts to encourage people to gamble. It always says gamble responsibly, but then drink responsibly, and some people can't do that. So we don't really need to encourage people to do it. People want to gamble, that's fine, but it needs to stay in control. And for some people, that's difficult.
Yeah, because it seems in gambling adverts that when it says things like, when the fun stops, it's only there because they have to put it. So they'll make it as quick as possible.
Yeah. Correct. Yeah, it's the kind of little aside that they have to put on there to justify their activities. But I mean, and it really doesn't help when role models and celebrities get involved in the adverts. It kind of gives it a credibility and a sort of justification which perhaps shouldn't be there. So obviously, it's individual choice, but I think it behoves all of us to look after people who might be going down a slippery slope and suffering harm as a result of gambling.
Yeah, and in terms of people that maybe have continued gambling throughout the pandemic, that would have been really tough for them because a lot of people have been struggling financially that whole time, and then if they're losing a lot of their money on gambling, it's just going to make things even worse.
Absolutely. There are lots of health inequalities involved with gambling. So there are people who are very wealthy who gamble lots of money. They can afford to lose it, arguably. Those people near the breadline who think that gambling is a way out of their poverty, clearly they've got so much to lose. They've got everything to lose. They could lose their house, they could lose their job, they could lose their relationship and end up homeless. And plenty of people have gone down that avenue. So it is dependent on age, gender, ethnicity, and deprivation levels. And we need to look after everybody from whatever class they're from. We need to make sure that people don't come to any harm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of the time when you look at the locations of bookies and gambling machines in general, they are in areas of deprivation.
They really, really are. And some of the most deprived areas have some of the greatest number of gambling outlets. So it is a kind of acquired behaviour, but it can't be a healthy behaviour. When you've only got little income, you need to spend it wisely, to not risk squandering anymore. And there are different ways to have fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what do you think are the main obstacles for people to get support?
I think that there's a kind of shame involved for some people, a guilt. So they wouldn't necessarily say that they've gone to spend money at the bookies or that they've gambled online and made a heavy loss, because there's a shame. It's sometimes not just their money; it's family money. It's the money that they share with their partner, or money that could be spent on food for the kids. And so clearly they're not gonna talk about it if things are going badly for them. But at the end of the day, as the gambling companies are earning the money, and they always will, because the profits are always on their side, and the punters generally lose. So whilst it's fun to sort of take a little flutter, as I say, for many people, when it gets out of hand, it can be very detrimental to their welfare in many ways. So I think getting help as soon as somebody identifies a problem in themselves or in a loved one, it's important to get the help. And as I say, it is there. 8,500 people were helped last year. The treatment service, the National Gambling Treatment Service, is set up by the NHS in conjunction with lots of charities around the country, and people can get one-to-one help either online or on the telephone, on the website, or with support groups. There's plenty of help there, and it's non-judgmental, it's friendly, it's accessible, and it's very effective. So I would encourage people to use it.
Yeah, and 8,500 people is of course a lot of people, but it's nothing compared to the amount of people that are forecast to have a gambling addiction. So that just shows the extent of which people aren't really getting help.
Well, you'd be shocked to hear that for every one person that's had help last year, there's an estimated 160 people for every one of them who could benefit from some help and support. Cognitive behavioural therapy, one-to-one conversations from people who are trained and people who've already been down the route and come through it themselves, who are sometimes the best advisors because they understand and can identify with the problems. But, the help is there. And it's really important to take it when it's necessary.
Yeah, and money in general is something that people don't really tend to want to talk about, do they? So it makes perfect sense that people wouldn't want to talk about a gambling addiction and the fact that they might have lost loads of money.
Well, here's the thing, isn't it? People who suddenly make a windfall in one good bet, it's so thrilling. They tell the world about it.
Yeah.
But if they make lots of little losses, which they will do, or a big loss, they're not going to tell anybody. There's no pride in losing a lot of money gambling. It's just a lose-lose. So they keep quiet about it, and sometimes they try and make up for that loss by putting more money on something else, and goes from bad to worse. So it's about just staying in control.
Yeah. And what are maybe the best ways to stay in control? Because it's probably quite easy to slip into an addiction and maybe not even realise it.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you can talk about setting yourself a limit, saying, I will only spend, a fiver or a tenner. But then, it's so easy to lose that money and say, well, I'll just do it again and see if I can reclaim the money. And then you've lost, double the amount. And it goes, so it's like having, it's like an alcoholic having one drink. One drink leads to the second drink, and then you become disinhibited, and two drinks becomes four drinks. So it's almost better not to gamble at all. Keep that money, spend it on something that's more rewarding, that you are going to benefit from, or somebody else is going to benefit from, and that in itself earns rewards in the pleasure center of the brain, that pleasure pathway. And you start to learn that behavior. You say, spend the money more wisely and get rewards in a different way. And people can learn to give up the addiction that they had before.
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, a lot of people with addictions is that same old thing of they won't realise they have an addiction, some people, and they'll think that they can stop gambling at any time, but find it very hard.
Absolutely. And for every celebrity that advertises gambling sites, there's a celebrity that is happy to tell the world how they went downhill and how it nearly ruined their lives. I can think of many. I won't name them now, but they're in the public eye, and they've come out and they've said, my goodness, this nearly ruined my life and the life of my family. And those messages are very worthwhile being heard as well.
Yeah, there are so many stories out there, aren't there? So where could we find more information about this if we are suffering from gambling or know someone? Where can we go?
Well, there's the helpline, which is 0808 80 20 133. And the website is begambleaware.org/NGTS.
Great. Well, many thanks for coming on the show today. It's been great having you on.
My pleasure. Thank you very much, and have a good rest of the day.